I want to have a. I want to look at the idea of labor in Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 23. The Bible says, "In all labor there is profit." Today is Labor Day, 2014. In Paducah, Kentucky, they had a Labor Day celebration. It's the only one that I know of in the area. But I wanted to talk a little bit about labor, and because in Genesis God says, "By the sweat of your face you shall provide," and labor is an important part of each person's life, to sell your labor, just wages, unjust wages. It even affects political parties. Which party is the party of labor today? Is the Democrats the party of labor, or the Republicans? I really lean toward the Democrat Party being more the party of labor. But yet, are they really for the laborers of the American people? Whenever you consider, let's do a little looking at history. With the rise of the Industrial Revolution in the world, and going from farm implements to industrial implements and organized labor, from a feudal system in Europe to what became the factory system in America, because in the time of Thomas Jefferson, most of America was farmers. But that did not stay the case by the mid-1800s. And what you had was a lot of the rise of collective bargaining. And I want to cite some riots that took place as people became unhappy. There was the Haymarket Riot in Chicago that took place because people were unsatisfied with their working conditions. I want to cite a fire, the Triangle Shirt Fire, in which a lot of women were burned to death. I also want to consider the coal mining industry, which much of it today is non-union and union busting. And the unions and the coal miners used to get paid with company script, live in company housing, and buy from company stores, and the miners' life was a dangerous life, and it still is today. The Labor Day is a time to celebrate it. I am disappointed. As a Southern Baptist, I've never seen a Sunday school lesson about Labor Day or in any kind of a church setting. They may be in other church denominations, but I've never heard this discussed. Of course, churches and the leadership of churches are primarily made up of middle and upper middle class people, and the people that write the literature of them. They're not primarily working people writing the literature. I want to bring up the name of the Wobblies and the American Federation of Labor and the afl-cio. Whenever I was a teenager in Mount Vernon, Illinois, there was a shoe factory on Perkins Street. And I went to work there when I was 16 years old, and I joined the union. And it was a closed shop. It was a reasonable union, and a World War II veteran who landed on Normandy's Beach the first day was our president. And I think it was very, very reasonable. Back at that time, I think minimum wage was $1.68. And like so many other factories, like the Brown Shoe Company, the Florissant Shoe Company, where I worked as a belt boy and in the fitting room, was eventually closed down, and the factories were sent, I believe, to China. Now in China, and there's a video that I want to recommend, is called Death by China. In China, which is we can't fairly compete with because they have no collective bargaining rights there. The only people that represent the Chinese workers are the Communist Party. And I don't think that they are interested in them. Well, I mentioned there's some people that I'd encourage you to look up, like John L. Lewis, and I want to mention Henry Ford. Let's talk about Henry Ford for a few moments. And Henry Ford was an entrepreneur, and he invented the automobile, and he employed a lot of people in his labor, and he started them off, I believe it was, at $5 a day, which was a lot of money. And America was on the gold standard at that point. And he resisted collective bargaining or unionizing the labor, but he eventually gave in to that and went along with it. In Mayfield, Kentucky, they used to have a really large tire plant. But again, this is a case where maybe the union asked for too much. I don't know. But General Tire in Mayfield, Kentucky, which had been there for maybe 30 or 35 years, closed and moved out. And people didn't think that would happen, but it did. And we're seeing this all across America, where people don't have rights to collective bargaining, or they can pay them slave labor wages and bring it back here and sell them in the big box stores. And these corporations move across the globe like in a global chess game. There's recently been a concern about, I think it's Burger King, changing their headquarters to Canada so they can structure their taxes as a corporation to avoid taxation. Meanwhile, the average laborer has to pay taxes. We have to pay taxes, but because America has a tax on corporations, they will move them to other places. I started out in my life, I want to talk about a device of safety in global corporations and labor, because now I bought a TomTom, and I've had a map, just a paper map. We've all had paper maps. And you open it up and you look, and I bought a TomTom. But TomTom, headquartered in Amsterdam, manufactured in China, imported here, and sold all over the world. And this is the working conditions of labor today. It's primarily they're using a lot of laborers in China where there's a cheap labor market. Corporations then will put a language on it like they do TomTom and put them all over the world. And they'll sell them here. But the labor is not here because they can go to countries where the communists are in control. And it was hard enough to get labor rights in this country. And so what they've done here in the chess game is move the manufacturing across the ocean where there are no labor rights or collective bargaining, and there's no EPA or restrictions like that, and then they bring it back here and sell them. private property is the reason, or to gain property is the reason why people work, is to gain something. That's the motivation for working. Selfishness is a cornerstone in business, that you want to gain something, you want to exchange something for your labor, and so therefore people work for so many dollars per hour. Now, in our country, in an earlier period of time, we had slavery, and people were sold into slavery. And that doesn't exclusively mean the Africans coming from the Ivory Coast and going through the Middle Passage and being brought to America and being forced into that. They did that also to the Irish who came from Ireland. In fact, Irish slaves were cheaper at one point than black slaves, and that's the reason why that they got the Irish slaves, and sometimes they were interbred with the black slaves, and that's how you got the black Irish, and they're still down in the Caribbean. But the slave trade, which came to America, Thomas Jefferson said that slavery was a wolf being held by its ears, and of course it cost America a great deal of pain to solve that. And the black soldiers at one point, when they served in the army, were not granted as much salary as the white soldiers, and they balked on that and refused their pay. But eventually they were paid equally. The capitalistic system, as described in The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, and laissez-faire economics, and the struggle that's entailed there is a part of labor's struggle. Another thing that I wanted to talk about in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration, in taking care of people who had been laboring but hadn't saved up, he developed Social Security. But I found out today that actually Germany, under the administration of Otto von Bismarck, was the first country to develop a Social Security system. Otto von Bismarck was. So those are a few thoughts about Labor Day and labor and the history of labor, and I'll say more about this in the future.